Hey, it's Shabes! And today marks the 6-month anniversary of me working in the anime industry, in particular with Media OCD and Discotech Media. I've had a really great experience so far, and I wanted to make a video sharing my experiences with you and what it's been like so far. Of course, there's non-disclosure agreements, so I won't be talking about most of the titles that I actually worked on. This is purely a nuts and bolts perspective of what I actually worked on and what it was like to work on it. You're not going to see any money figures or any private DMs or anything like that, so don't go looking for some tea or nothing. There's actually a lot more variety to it than you would first expect. When I first started working, I asked my boss if I could do as many different things as possible. I was cool with doing whatever he asked me to, but I was hoping to get a full experience and try to get as much stuff, like new things. So I've been very fortunate to have that opportunity, and for the most part, everything that I've worked on has been kind of a different task, and it's been very interesting. The very first thing I was assigned, and what I was initially hired to do, is quality check. Basically playtest the product before it gets copied hundreds of times. I'd check for video errors like glitchy artifacts or interlacing, audio errors like if the sound doesn't work or isn't playing one side of the stereo, and most often subtitle errors like misspellings, grammar, and problems with timing. I had to get a Blu-ray player and a 5.1 surround system, but once I did, I was FedExed the Blu-rays, and it would be up to me to watch through the whole disc, use every menu option, check that all the chapters were in the right place, all the while filling out an Excel spreadsheet of all my findings, which are then either fixed or not fixed by someone else. When there was a subtitle error, which it most often was, I'd not only have to write the whole subtitle line out and highlight the issue, I also needed to write a potential solution, which could add up a lot of time. You could say I was being paid to watch anime, but it's not as much of a cakewalk as it sounds. You have to pay attention the whole time. You can't look away once or you might miss a video error that shows up for a fraction of a second. There's a lot of rewinding and replaying multiple times to be sure that you caught something. It's not all that easy to catch some of these video glitches like interlacing. I often had to go frame by frame to be sure it was there. The first show I quality checked, which I can confirm is Govarian because it's already been released, had a lot of film dirt and other small blemishes that I thought were video artifacts, but video artifacts are actually much larger and distort the image itself. But since I thought all that film dirt at the time was artifacts, I ended up watching extra closely and wound up finding stuff like this. Okay, I have to share this. So, this show has had a lot of kind of rough production stuff, but nothing, I've never seen anything like this. Wait a second. Okay, what was that, right? You saw like a flash. I was like, wait, what? Let's go back frame by frame. Let's go find it. It takes a while to go frame by frame. Oh, there it is. It's a fucking hand that they were moving the fucking cell with, and they just kept it in there. Oh my god. The second show I quality checked had a lot more subtitle issues, to the point where it had to be sent back to be retranslated. It was grueling at times, but overall I enjoyed doing quality check. It helped that the shows I did weren't on either extreme of too boring or too cringe or too remarkable, which made it easier to pay constant attention while not getting distracted, which I think is the make or break when doing a job like this successfully. After that, the only shows that needed quality check at the time were parts of longer franchises that needed the same people quality checking them, so instead my next job was on the other end of quality checking. For 2 shows, I received the notes after they were quality checked and made those revisions myself. I used Agisub, which is a free subtitle program that many fansubbers and people in the business use. It was the first time I used the program beyond a little playing around with it, and it was great for experience because there was all sorts of different problems to fix. From simple stuff like cleaning up grammar and language, to adjusting the timing, to more involved tasks like subtitling a text conversation in a clearer way. I even went so far as to translate some credits in the PVs. Thankfully, I found the credits on another site and I used Google Translate, which it does work, at least for named credits. The quality checkers I was working with had such incredible attention to detail, like translation checks or whether a line was over-localized or not. Very small aspects that might not seem like a big deal, but could be caught by some annoying fans. You could tell they've been doing this for a while. Sometimes there'd be more of a suggested change, and it'd be up to me to use my best judgment, which is where having watched a lot of anime and learning a little bit of Japanese does come in handy, to know what's considered normal in these situations and have some understanding of the material that shows that you care. I think that's an important trait in doing this kind of work. You need to care about what you're doing, no matter what anime it is you're working on, even if you consider it not to your taste, which it most likely won't be. It was a little daunting making the call sometimes, but otherwise I felt great about making those edits. The next job was to clean up some closed captioning for the English dub of a series. This was also done through Agisub, but closed captions are different from subtitles in a few ways. Most notably, they also include sound effects, including characters laughing or gasping. Since this is for the hard of hearing, having a subtitle suddenly appear above an existing subtitle would be pretty disorienting, so that meant no two subtitle events were allowed to overlap. Instead, to compensate this, it's okay if the closed captions weren't always synced to the lines. They also mark which character is talking if they're off screen, or have their mouths obscured, which naturally happens very often in anime. It was especially annoying in this case because they'd be missing the names so often, and so many names or words were misspelled, so I wouldn't find out the name of a character or settle on how to spell a word until much later, and I'd have to go back and fix my own corrections. They were often poorly worded too. Sometimes whoever did the captions couldn't understand what the character was saying in English, so they made something up. I didn't have to fix every line out of the 26 episodes I worked on. Some episodes were worse than others, but it did take quite a while. This was probably the most physically taxing job so far, but at least I enjoyed the anime it was for, and I especially appreciated it as a way to get more experience with Agisub. After that, I moved away from Agisub for a little while, and used Adobe Premiere for the next series of jobs, which was timestamping chapter marks, basically identifying where your Blu-ray skips to in a movie or episode. I used Premiere because it was easier to go frame by frame, because the chapter marks had to be precisely at the first frame of the OP, halfway point, ED, etc. When a show didn't use an eye catch, like most anime in the late 2010s, I basically had to guess the best place. It had to be roughly the middle of the episode, and most often I was able to tell by the sound getting cut out, and they cut to something like an establishing shot. But otherwise, when there was an eye catch, I chapter marked it at the first frame after the eye catch played. I marked the timestamps like this using Notepad, and had to save them specifically as CSVs. For movies though, it was up to me to use my best judgment for where the chapters were, save for a few required ones like the credits. I was also tasked with providing screen caps for these chapters for the movies. You know how like scene selection has an image correlating with each chapter? At first, I thought this meant it had to be the screen cap I timestamped the chapter on, like the very first one, which most of them were really boring establishing shots. But after I was told, no, you want to get some kind of good screen caps, I went back and chose shots with faces in them instead. Overall, I worked on these chapter marks for 4 TV series, 2 movies, and an OVA. And each one didn't take me very long, especially if each episode had predictable patterns to how they were paced. But I think it was still important for me to experience using Adobe Premiere for my job in that way. The next project is probably the coolest thing I've done so far, and it's for an anime I definitely don't want to spoil until they announce it, so there won't be much visuals here, unfortunately. Recently, Discotek has started producing English dubs for some of their licenses, and I was tasked with helping them in the scriptwriting process. My job was to take the subtitles that we had available and note every single audible sound that the actors would have to recreate for the dub. Every laugh, every grunt, every gasp. It's similar to my work with the closed captions, except I didn't have to write the characters' names in brackets every time. Instead, what I had to do was cite the character's name for each line in a different column on Agisub, which was difficult when there's a lot of generic background characters that are all unique, and they need to be separated like person A, person B, person C, person D, and person E. Then it was a matter of going back through and marking all of those noises. If it was a mix of voices, like a crowd of people yelling, I had to note that specifically, even include some traits like angrily or disoriented. My boss actually gave me a script of one of their previous dubbing efforts to kind of give me a sense of what this was like, which was very, very helpful. You can't just copy-paste the same sound effect like grunt, 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 if they're not precisely the same in the audio, even if the intent is similar. This notation also included abbreviations, like OC, which stands for off-camera, MNS, or mouth not shown, which again happens a lot more than you'd realize, and even OM and CM, which are open mouth and closed mouth, to better describe the sound of a grunt or a laugh if you can't see the character's mouth. The more definition you give, the better chances the dub has at being accurate to the original source. It took kind of a while to get hang of keeping track of everything, but the fun part I've found about this job in general so far is developing processes to make a job go by faster or more efficient. And since I'm looking for experience as much as I am looking to get paid for it, the more work I can get, the better. The last major thing I got to work on also has to do with an English dub. I've actually been doing a lot of English dubs lately, it's very interesting. This one's a pretty interesting situation, though. This show was dubbed by Saban Entertainment and aired on Nick Jr. back in the day, and while Discotek couldn't find the original masters to that dub, they did find some decent bootlegs of it, albeit poor VHS quality with some of the episodes you see like the Nick Jr. watermark on them. They do have access to the Japanese masters, however, which are in much better standard quality, and my job was to cut the Japanese master footage to sync it with the English dub, since the dub does cut out portions here and there. So my boss sent me a hard drive with all of the footage, since each episode of the Japanese masters are 12 gigabytes, so that's not very easy to send through Dropbox like he usually does. There was over 40 episodes to cut. I liked it because I got to be in my element again using Premiere, and the best part about this was I didn't have to export anything. I could just send him back the project file. It was very convenient in that way. I made each episode its own sequence in the project. The masters would take up the whole screen, and the bootleg footage would lay on top in the corner. My boss made remastered versions of the English opening and ending credits, and I would sync the two files down to the same frame. And from there, I would play through the episode and watch for when the two of them mismatched. At first, I wanted to make sure everything was frame perfect, but it ended up taking quite a while since, for some weird reason, the bootleg would flip-flop between being one frame ahead and one frame behind the master. It ended up being almost 2 hours for one episode, just keep moving it back and forth. So I realized quickly it wasn't that big of a deal because they kind of canceled each other out when they did that, so it ended up going by much faster afterwards. Almost every episode had something that needed editing. The common trait with all of them was cutting out the eye catches and end cards, which at least for half the show were white Japanese katakana and kanji. The bootleg cut would do all sorts of different things to cut these out, from fading to black, to abruptly cutting to the next scene, to even cropping the footage. They'd do anything to avoid showing those young children moon runes, God forbid. Still, some episodes were worse than others. The series wasn't all that graphic, but the bootleg almost never showed things like gunfire, excessive violence, nudity, blood, but even some random reaction shots they would cut. There was not really a whole lot of consistency. They would cut a scene in one episode and then they would leave kind of a similar scene in another. There's even an episode where they don't cut anything, not even the Japanese eye catches. You can still see them. And the episode's subject matter was definitely way over the line of what was supposed to be appropriate for kids. It was weird. There's at least 3 or 4 episodes that they did skip altogether. There's no dub for them. But there's other episodes that you wouldn't believe were included. I know this is kind of difficult to visualize and I can't really tell you what the show is. I actually made a habit to screen cap every single major incident of a scene that was cut, just for documentation's sake. I just thought it'd be interesting to share later when the series does get released. I'm hoping to make like a Twitter thread of something like that when that does get released. And yeah, that was my first 6-ish months working in the anime industry. I've worked on a couple things since that recording, and but I'll save that for another time if I feel like doing this again, or do another year or something, like a year update, or I don't know. But it's been really fun. It's been really crazy actually working on this stuff and then having it, like, yeah, I worked on that kind of thing. There are some titles that are out right now on DVD that I did work on. I guess I can confirm that the second show that I quality checked was The Wonderful Adventures of Niels. That was a really interesting show. Has some Amuro Oshii episodes, actually. Stuff like that, and certain things here and there that have been announced and released, but there are definitely some that I will definitely tell you that I helped work on that when they are announced, and I'll definitely keep updating and stuff. But this has been really cool. Thank you so much for watching. I don't know how interesting it was, or if it seemed kind of boring for especially the lack of visuals. So I do apologize for that. It's also really hard to like visualize some stuff to show you, really. But yeah, I hope that was interesting for you. I don't really have a better way to end this video. I guess it's best to thank my patrons for sponsoring this video. I do have to read it off, but thank you so much to Beyond Ghibli, Cam, El Pozerino, Flute Morph, Ginkotaku, Jackson, Lone Crit, My Anime Pod, Najbed, Phosphor, Rikafag, Rudolph, Seaweed Ambassador, Tengoon, Tippy Mango, Unique Numosaurus, Uptight Gnome, and Yellow Cheese. I'm so happy I can say that many names, and everyone else that's patroning me, it means so much. Thank you so much for watching and being patient with the things that I make. If you want to become a patron like them, they have a bunch of rewards, and including early access to videos, where my next major video is going to be in 5 parts, and they're going to have early access to each of those parts as I finish it, and then the whole video will come out when it's ready, like months from now. But until then, thank you very much. I'll see you again.